Why are people investing in Cincinnati? Why should anyone even buy an Airbnb or short-term rental in Cincinnati? And who is coming here? Like, why would anybody even want to be here? So in this video, I'm going to answer all the questions about investing in short-term rentals in Cincinnati and why it's such a good market. My name is Yiwei, and I have been investing in Cincinnati for the last 4.5 to 5 years, and all I do is short-term rentals. So I own and also manage in this area. And a lot of the most common questions I get is, why should anybody invest in Cincinnati? First of all, Cincinnati is not even on the map in terms of big cities. Okay, it's probably like a second-tier city and is not a vacation market, so it's not like Orlando or Gatlinburg. So why are people coming to Cincinnati? Is there demand for it? And why should anybody invest here? That's a really good question, because I personally would not have invested in Cincinnati if I were not living here. Investing in the Midwest was something that just became popular in the last 1 to 2 years. So here's why Cincinnati is a great place to invest for short-term rentals. So in 2021, 2022, right after COVID, Airbnb and VRBO came out with the reports of the top growing cities for short-term rentals, and Cincinnati made it on the list. Cincinnati put itself on the map for that reason. And there are so many reasons why people are coming to Cincinnati, and I will get to that in a little bit. But the top 2 reasons I would say that Cincinnati is really attractive for investors for short-term rentals is, number 1, the lower price point. So it is not buying $100,000 houses to do short-term rentals, but you're not paying $800,000 to $1 million like you are in the vacation markets like Orlando or the ski areas or Gatlinburg, for example. So you are probably going to pay between $350 to $500 for a very solid house that is going to make you returns, even at current interest rates, which right now is about 7 to 7.5%. So you can do that even at those rates. The revenues coming in is high enough to where you can still cash flow at high rates with pretty reasonable purchase prices. You can still purchase houses in the $250 range, but I would say that's more of an outlier than it is the norm. So sometimes that could still work. Maybe if you're paying all cash and there's multiple offers, you can win that house, that offer. But typically, the 250s is going to be very low chance. So in the vacation markets, you may have to pay $800 to $1 million. And on top of that, you have to style and furnish and design the house to the point where it stands out. So for example, in Orlando, it is one of the most competitive, saturated short-term rental markets in the US. But lots of people think that it is one of the best places to invest because there are so many travelers and people going there to the area. But investing in the area is a completely different story, because the location has to be good. The house has to be good. So there are people spending $100,000 to $200,000 on top of the purchase price just to make their short-term rental profitable. So if you just randomly bought a house in a good vacation rental neighborhood, it will not make as much as what the top tier vacation rental markets or vacation rental houses could be making. So the lower price point is a really good entryway for a lot of investors who are coming and starting. So if you want to start investing in short-term rentals, the Midwest or Cincinnati could be a really good place for you to start. The second reason is there are multiple reasons why people are coming to Cincinnati to visit, to stay in a short-term rental or a furnished rental. And it is more than just vacation. So in the vacation markets, people are coming for vacation only. They're coming during the breaks, they're coming during the holidays, they're coming whenever just to visit for tourism in the area. But in a city like Cincinnati, where it's not very touristy, though there are events going on, there are so many other reasons why people are coming. And this gets to the next question, which is who is coming to Cincinnati? I have it broken down into 3 categories of the travelers who are coming to Cincinnati who needs a short-term rental, Airbnb, or furnished rental to stay. The first category is going to be the obvious vacation travelers. There are still people who are coming here for vacation, for festivals, for games, even though the Bengals aren't doing too good, the baseball games, even though the Reds aren't doing too great. So there are still people coming in for those type of events, conferences. For example, in 2025, the FIFA soccer tournaments are going to be in Cincinnati, and there's also the Blink Light Festival. There's also the Forbes 30 Under 30 conference is also in Cincinnati. And one of the other exciting things is that the Sundance Film Festival has Cincinnati as one of their top 3 cities so far. So we don't know what the result is yet, but Cincinnati is in the top 3 cities for the film festival. So there's a lot of reasons why people are coming to the area for festivals or events. But I would say that is probably not the bulk of it. There's still so many reasons why people are coming. And that brings me to the second category, which is for work. There are so many people coming here for work, and not just corporate work where they are working for a business. They're coming because they need to stay a week, which there are, but a lot of them are other work related, like medical work related. They're coming here, they're traveling nurses, they're traveling doctors, they're traveling vets. There's also the film industry. This is probably really not widely known, but in Ohio, there is a 30% tax abatement for all movies filmed in Ohio. That 30% even includes housing, food, anything that the movie uses. So a lot of the movie industries and movie producers like to film in Cincinnati to get that 30% rebate. And for that reason, they have to stay, the crew, the actors, everybody has to stay in the state of Ohio. And when they're filming in Cincinnati, they usually want to stay in Cincinnati. So that brings in a lot of people between the crew and the producers and everybody being in the movie. They have such a huge demand for the furnished housing, and a lot of them don't want to be in hotels when they're here for a couple months. They want to have their own space, washer dryers, and a house or a garage or parking. So those are the type of reasons why a lot of them always would prefer a short-term rental Airbnb versus staying in a hotel. And another reason why in the work category is all the athletes that are coming to stay. So sometimes people get traded, things happen, and they need a temporary place to stay while they work here while they play for the Reds, the Bengals, or anybody else on the team that needs a temporary place to stay. So if you follow football, like the Bengals aren't so great right now, the Reds aren't so great right now, but people are still coming in for those games. The third category is medical treatments. So Cincinnati has a very good treatment system for children and also certain surgeries for adults. So there are people that have come here because their kids have cancer or they are pregnant and need to have their baby here because they need to do surgery afterwards, or organ transplants, cancer treatments. There are people who are coming out of state, out of the country, even like from Dubai, who are coming here for treatments for their kids or for their family members. So lots of people need places to stay. And when they are here for that type of treatment, they typically don't want to be in a hotel either. They want to have their own space, cook, and oftentimes there are other family members traveling with them to take care of their other kids or help take care of the family when the person is at the hospital for treatment. So on top of all the short-term stays, there is also something called a midterm stay, which is any stays longer than 30 days, which a lot of these sometimes fall into. There are people that come here and just need a few months to stay for their work or for insurance claims or for relocation. So for example, somebody might have moved one of their employees to Cincinnati to work here and they need a couple months until their house is ready. Or insurance claims to where maybe their house had a fire, it got flooded, and they now need a place to stay until their house is fixed up. So when you're looking at vacation markets, there might not be so much demand in other areas outside of tourism. But in an area like Cincinnati, where there are so many reasons why people are coming to the area and so many different things going on, that vacation and tourism is not necessarily the only reason people come here. So there are so many diversified strategies to keep the rental booked. And that is one of the really good reasons why I still invest in Cincinnati, and there's still so much opportunities in different neighborhoods that I don't think it's saturated at this point, though you do have to have a really great product to be very profitable. But with all of these different reasons that people are coming to Cincinnati, I feel like it is still such a good place to invest. There is so much opportunity in here for short-term, mid-term furnished rentals if you invest in Cincinnati. What is the occupancy rate? This is one of the most common questions I get, and I just want to share the philosophy on occupancy rate. So the way I manage my short-term rentals and my clients' short-term rentals is that we don't just look at occupancy rate. And why is that? It's because higher occupancy rate does not necessarily equal higher revenue. Short-term rentals is very different from long-term rentals when thinking about the occupancy rate or the vacancy rate, because in long-term rentals, you want to be fully booked all the time because you want a tenant in there paying you rent every single month, and you want them to stay as long as possible so you don't have to turn over the place and try to find another tenant, which might take some time. So in that case, being occupied is good, and you want to be occupied all the time. But in short-term rentals, it's very different. It's a different way of thinking, because being occupied all the time does not mean that you are making the most revenue. It is not a linear correlation. It's not like the more occupied I am, the more I make. And you can always be 100% occupied if your rates are low enough. So if I lower my rates so low, I will guarantee that I will be 100% occupied. But the goal is not to be 100% occupied. The goal is to make the most amount of money in that amount of time for your short-term rental. So there are times when we can be less booked, but still be getting more revenue. And the reason for that is because there is another factor that comes in called the nightly rate. So we target our occupancy rates to be around 70 to 75%. And if it becomes way too occupied, we will adjust our rates to compensate for that. And if it is not occupied enough, then we will also lower our rates to bring the occupancy up. But we do not only look at occupancy, and occupancy is not the best judgment of how good a property is doing, because there have been many times where I have seen different listings or different houses be really occupied and it's not making as much money, or it is not occupied at all, maybe like 50%. So in general, that is how we treat our short-term rentals. But given that, I will share that the overall occupancy rate based on AirDNA for Cincinnati is about 50%. But the way we design our properties and our location, layout, everything based on the framework that I have tested over the last 4.5 years, our properties in Cincinnati are usually in the 70 to 75% range. And sometimes when we are booked under midterm stays where somebody is staying for 3 to 6 or 8 months, it will be 100% occupied. But there is also a pricing that I will do based on the opportunity cost of short-term rentals versus doing a longer stay. So pricing is a art and a science to the way we do short-term rentals, but I will say that occupancy is important, but we also need to look at it with our nightly rate. And just in general, because of that, we're always comparing how we are doing versus the market. So our occupancy rates are usually in the 70 to 75% range, and our nightly rate is also higher as well than what the market is. So we are able to bring up both occupancy and the nightly rate to give you the highest revenue. So that is something to consider when you are investing in short-term rentals, is to think about the occupancy rate, but also ask about the nightly rate, because at the end of the day, it is about how much money you're making that month or that year total versus are you, 80, 90% occupied. What are the neighborhoods like? So Cincinnati is by the river. So you have Cincinnati and then Northern Kentucky. So there are short-term rentals in Northern Kentucky as well because it's lower cost to purchase than coming to Cincinnati, but regulations are going to be very different. The city of Cincinnati is actually very friendly towards short-term rentals, and it does require a license, but your license doesn't really get rejected unless the building you are in a condo, for example, exceeds the number that is allowed. So Cincinnati is a great place to be because of regulations as well, but in the areas, in the neighborhoods of the city of Cincinnati, you have the downtown area, which lots of people shorten to OTR, which is over the Rhine. Downtown OTR used to be a very up-and-coming area, but over the last 5 to 7 years, it has really developed into the center of downtown where lots of restaurants are, lots of bars are. It's super easy to walk around. And the only negative is there's not a lot of parking and there are no elevators. So lots of these older buildings have 3 to 4 floors, but the guests just have to walk up the stairs because there's just no space for elevators. And because of that, that is one of the biggest cons of downtown. The other benefit of the OTR area is with a lot of these shells, a lot of them are newly developed. So you will have newer construction condos, you will have newer renovated units. And with the newly renovations, City of Cincinnati also gave out property tax abatements to some of these newly renovated places just to incentivize people to move into the area. And that really helps because the property taxes in the city of Cincinnati is pretty high. It's about 2.2 to 2.3% of what the house is worth. And with the tax abatements, you're only paying taxes on the land plus any value above the abatement amount, which sometimes it might be none, so you're just paying the land value. And sometimes it's paying maybe $100,000 to $200,000 instead of the $500,000 or $600,000 for this newly built house or big condo. The cons of being in downtown Cincinnati is that there's usually no parking and the guests would have to walk to a parking garage, park on the street, and sometimes street parking is for residents. But there's also HOA, so there's not a lot of single family homes downtown, so you will have a lot of condo associations. So making sure that the HOA allows short-term rentals is going to be a very big thing to check. And lots of guests love to be downtown, so you would purchase downtown if you only want to attract a lot of the people who want to be downtown. So they would be coming for festivals, games, sports, events, conferences. Sometimes the longer stay people would even prefer to be downtown, but it is a lot more expensive to the guests. So it is a balance between downtown and the other areas. The other neighborhood that I really love in Cincinnati for short-term rentals is the Oakley and Hyde Park area. It is a Class A neighborhood that lots of families love to be in. And it is also very shoppable. So there's all sorts of grocery stores, all sorts of restaurants. It's kind of like its own family neighborhood, 10 to 15 minutes outside of downtown. In this neighborhood, the houses are very old. So they are going to be about 100 years old. You could find some new construction houses, but they're going to be super expensive because they would have to tear down a house and rebuild, and that takes some time to do. And because they're very old, a lot of them only have one bathroom, which is a deal breaker for so many people. But people who are living in the area and used to that type of old house are used to the one bathroom. So sometimes you might see houses with like a half bath, any houses with like 2 full bathrooms above ground, like not in the basement, is very desirable. In those neighborhoods, you're probably going to start getting some driveways. There could still be street parking, and some places will have garages. And a lot of reasons why people like that area is because it's a very safe and family neighborhood that's very walkable to so many things, but it's also very close to the reasons why they're coming to the area. For example, be the hospitals or downtown or wherever they may work. So it's a very central location. The other areas that are very good inside the city of Cincinnati is potentially Northside and Mount Washington Anderson area. So those areas are more up and coming areas, probably a Class B neighborhood, but there are people that still like going to the neighborhoods if their friends live there, if their family lives there, so they're used to that type of neighborhood. But for somebody who does not like being in a neighborhood where there may be some rundown houses or shells, they may be uncomfortable in those neighborhoods. So that is an area to watch out for. But price points in the B-class neighborhoods of Northside and Mount Washington are going to be a lot lower than your Class A neighborhoods of downtown OTR and the Oakley High Park area. So outside of the city of Cincinnati, every little village, township, city has their own short-term rental regulations. So for that reason, depending on your risk tolerance for regulations, you may or may not want to be in those areas. And definitely check the zoning code before purchasing any property outside of the city of Cincinnati. So there are a lot of short-term rentals in the suburbs, and they do extremely well because there are lots of bigger homes, 4 to 5 bedrooms, 2-car garages, a yard. So like your typical suburban home that lots of families also like to be in because they're coming with bigger family, they have pets, or if they live in the area and they want to relocate to be close to work, or because they're in between houses, they want to still stay close to where their previous house was. So there is still demand for the suburbs of Cincinnati, but it is very, very dependent. So if you're looking to invest in Cincinnati, please reach out to me and I will help you with the regulations and where is the best place to purchase. Okay, here is the million-dollar question. How much can Airbnbs make in Cincinnati? And that is the question we all want to know. Don't we all want to know that? Unfortunately, the answer is going to be it depends. And it's going to depend on so many factors like the price points, the location, and your financing. But I do have a framework for creating the most profitable short-term rentals that I will go through in a little bit to help understand how much a short-term rental would make. First off though, I would say AirDNA is not the best place to look for how much something would make because AirDNA scrapes the data and it is not the most accurate. So when clients come to me asking how much could this property make, or when you look at a house and we're trying to figure out how much revenue this property is going to bring in, I usually look at actual reservation data in the area. Like, here are the numbers I am comfortable with giving you based on actual revenue over the last 3 years that properties in the area have done. And that type of information is not sent to AirDNA. That type of information is within property managers, owners in the local area. Regardless of where you are investing, reach out to the local property managers and they will be able to tell you actual reservation data. And I think that is such better data than what AirDNA could give you. And you could use AirDNA or some of the other websites as a directional estimate, but not the number to do all of your numbers or to calculate off of. I would talk to somebody locally. I would even say a much better way of trying to figure out revenue is looking on Airbnb and seeing how much places are charging on a nightly rate, how much their occupancy is. And that would actually give you a better data set than what AirDNA could be giving you. But when I look at how much a house could make for my client or for myself, I am looking at my own reservations data. But it is dependent on 3 factors. And this is the framework I use for everybody that I help purchase short-term rentals for. And this is how you get the most profitable short-term rental, because with every house, we want to maximize the total amount of revenue that this house can make. And the first one is going to be location. Very cliche, but location is still the most important thing, even for a short-term rental, because that is something that cannot be changed. You can rehab a bathroom, you can rehab a kitchen, you can paint the walls, but you cannot move the house to a different location. And location is so important because that is going to determine whether guests want to stay in that house. And that's going to determine how much they will pay for that house. And that is going to determine if you are able to resell or if that house will appreciate in value in the future. So location is one thing I do not compromise on. The second thing is the size and the layout. So smaller houses aren't going to make as much as bigger houses, especially when certain number of bedrooms are more saturated than other number of bedrooms in the area. So that is one thing that the local property manager will be able to tell you and say, like, for example, in Cincinnati, downtown, there are so many one-bedroom condos. If you buy another one-bedroom condo downtown, you are going to be one of 1,000 bedroom condos. So what is going to make you stand out? Versus if you buy a size and a layout where more people can sleep in and more bedrooms and have other amenities that the guests want, you will have higher revenue than somebody who just have a one-bedroom house, a one-bedroom condo. And it is not always about sleeping as many people as possible. So we're not talking about putting triple bunk beds in a bedroom so we can sleep 6 people. I'm talking about actual bedrooms that people can feel comfortable sleeping in, not as many heads and beds as possible. The last one is going to be the design and amenities. Design is such an important factor for a short-term rental, and that is completely within your control. I will say though that the best design will not overcome a mediocre or undesirable location. So sometimes it will definitely help and you will get people and traffic to the area, but you will have a hard time keeping people to stay if that location is not great or not what they're looking for. So design is super important and it will enhance and bring you more revenue than a mediocre design or no thought into the design at all. So when I look at a house, I take all 3 of these into consideration and we'll be able to give an estimate based on the actual revenue that we have gotten in our portfolio. And this is how a lot of our clients are getting super books and getting above market revenue and rates in Cincinnati. So when you're looking to invest in Cincinnati, it's not about purchasing the cheapest home in this location and throwing everything you can into it and get it up and running and manage it yourself from far away. There are so many factors that will give you the highest revenue of short-term rentals, and Cincinnati is still a great place to invest. I will say that the owners who are buying everything and not having guidance in purchasing their property, designing their property, and operating their property are the ones where I have seen have pretty low occupancy rates and not doing as good. So they're the ones that are the first to leave the market. The houses that are generating the most money are owners who have a long-term vision for their property. They are a long-term buy and hold, and they're willing to put investments in to do what it takes to get the most revenue and provide that experience that guests love. Because at the end of the day, the guests are the ones who are paying with their money. They are deciding why they should stay in your short-term rental versus somebody else's. Even though there's still tons of opportunity in the short-term rental market in Cincinnati, having a great product is going to set you above others, and that is how you're going to guarantee that you will be profitable and still making money regardless of what the market is doing. In summary, Cincinnati is a great place to invest for short-term rentals because of the huge variety and reasons why people are coming to Cincinnati. You still have that lower price point versus buying in vacation markets or buying in expensive states like California or New York. And you are still making a lot more based on the amount that you are putting in. So the best way to actually see how a property is doing is to look at an example. So I have a video where I share the revenue and costs and expenses and everything for my short-term rental for the last 2 years in Cincinnati, and you can find that video below. If you want more data, more information, more examples of how houses are doing as short-term rentals in Cincinnati, schedule a call with me in the link below, and I will go over a lot more data and answer any other questions you have for Cincinnati. And I will see you in the next video.